Good evening, guys. So we'll start with the session. So without wasting any time, because we have a very less duration, so we have to see many things. So have you guys revised whatever we have discussed in the last class? Yes. So I gave you some of the research assignment to do on the basic history about the SQL and on MySQL. Did you guys do that? Yes? See, no, very genuine you guys are. So please make sure that whatever the task that has been getting assigned, the research topic, whatever it is, you should not neglect just because that it is not taken up in the class. Suppose, see, history basic thing that why I am not specifically stressing on it in the classes because yes, comparatively to other topics. So in the history, just you need to understand that when they have been invented and what exactly, like which version that we will be using and what are the few recent versions that are available. If you know this much, this is more than sufficient with related to the SQL and with related to the MySQL as well. So it will not even take 10 to 15 minutes, more than that it will not be taking to collect this information. And suppose by chance that if they ask you guys, tell me who invented MySQL, why they have named as my in the MySQL. So, and if you are not answering it, again it is a problem. So that is why I am telling, so please don't keep any pending words. Whenever any assignment is given, whenever any task is given, try to complete it on that day itself. I know that every day late that you will be around till 7:15, 7:30 you will be here, but before 5 o'clock or before 4 o'clock you have a lot of time to do the research and spend some time on your revisions. So please make sure that don't neglect from the beginning. So start doing the revisions properly. And in the last class we have discussed a very important foundation which every one of you guys should be aware. So the most important thing is what is data, we have seen what is database, we have seen, and at the same time that you understood that why you have to learn SQL language to communicate with what and why it is important to communicate and why it is important to manage the facts and figures or data or the database. And also we have seen that which software that which we will be using, that is a MySQL. And MySQL installation software, MySQL installation video, it is already present in your LMS. Okay, so just what you need to do is you need to go. So full stack bundle will be there. Inside that if you go to an SQL, there you will be getting the installation software video. That video that how you have to download and install. So just to follow that process and install the MySQL software into your system as soon as possible before we start the practical execution. I want in every one of you guys that software to be present. It is already there, just you have to go watch and install that into your system. And we will be using 8.0 version. We will be using MySQL 8.0, which is a recent version. That version we will be using in the class. So this is an update. So now we have to continue with the rest of the things. So very important, as I said, that you should know whatever that we will be discussing throughout an SQL, everything it will be present on that facts and figures, the managing, again managing, it is all about the storing and it is all about the fetching the facts and figures. So this is what that we will be doing. To do that only you will be learning an SQL. So now till here it is fine. So what we had and you have understood the three set of rules also, that here we will be using a MySQL software. So if you wanted to use a MySQL software and if you wanted to manage your facts and figures, then you should store that in the table format only. So we had three rules there. So first one is we have to create a table. Second one is we have to specify the column names and the data types for that. And third one is the insertion. So whatever the facts and figures that we have, that facts and figures what we have to do, we have to start inserting to our table. So here we will be managing our facts and figures in which format? In the table format. So till here it is fine. So now you understood, like, yes, we have to create a table, we have to specify the data types, column names, insertion, fine. But don't you think that before you start creating a table, that you need to know and understand that how exactly that you have to construct your table? Why? Because if you doesn't know that, how you have to construct, how standard, because this is a structured query language. Whatever you do, whatever you predefine, that only you have to keep on following it, because this is a structured query language. So we cannot construct the tables that however we want. So whenever or before you start constructing the tables, you need to see, you should also know what name you have to give for your table, and you should also know that columns are present, means for that columns what names that you have to give. So many things are present that which you have to analyze and which you have to know before constructing your tables or before creating the tables. See, an example that whenever we start constructing an house, do you think that directly they will start constructing an house? No. Always planning they will be doing. If you start directly constructing it, construct once and see. Then again, if you are very rich, again you have to demolish, again you have to start constructing it. Always a person who has a brain, what he will do first before start constructing an house, he will plan. Like how, where, what should be present. Why? Because if small thing, if it is mistake also, again they have to invest some money on that. Again they have to rebuild that particular thing. Again they have to do all the changes that whatever they have to do. Same thing applies for our tables as well. Without a plan, without understanding that what it should be present inside the table, if you construct your tables, again if any changes is required, always you have to keep on removing the tables, again and again you have to start constructing your table. And if the table is very huge, and it is a wastage of time, and that will not be an efficient also, that every time creating, removing it, again creating, again modifying. Just if you keep on worrying about only the structure of the table, when you will insert, when you will try to fetch the data according to your requirement. So before you start constructing a table, a certain plan has to be present, like how the things has to be there. So to do that planning, that how exactly your table should be there, how you have to insert the data, everything only, you need to know a very important topic, and in that topic there are certain terminologies. How we have seen a data and database, similar manner we have a very important terminology. So in that, the main important topic is nothing but it is an ER diagram, or it is nothing but it is a entity relationship diagram. So basically, entity relationship diagram or ER diagram, it is a plan. It is a diagrammatic representation of how your data should be there, of how your tables should be there, what should be the table name, what should be the column names, how you have to construct it. So that planning will be present where? Will be present, and you will be doing that through the ER diagrams. So basically an ER diagram is nothing but it is a diagrammatic representation of your data. In other words, it's a plan that how you have to construct your table and how you have to put the data inside that. So few people will be telling this as an entity relationship diagram. Few people will be directly telling this an ER diagram, or few people will also be telling this as an ERD. Anything they can tell. So ERD is nothing but what? Entity relationship diagram. ER diagram is what? Again, it's an entity relationship diagram. So directly, see, someone asks you that what is an ER diagram? Don't just tell the full form as entity relationship diagram. Why? Because the question is not what is a full form of ER diagram. Question is what it is. So both the things are different. Telling the full form is different, telling what exactly that is, both are different. Many of the students, that is what the mistake that they will be doing. If they ask, tell what is SQL, they will only tell it's a structured query language. Apart from that, they will not tell anything. But question, it will not be what is a full form. Question will be what is that SQL. So you need to explain something more about that along with what it stands for. Similarly, ER diagram also you have to tell it stands for entity relationship diagram, and it is nothing but it is a diagrammatic representation of our data. So here completely that representations, that terminologies is what that which we will be seeing. So in this, the first one which you will be seeing is what is this basically an entity is all about. We will be seeing what is a relationship also. Diagram is nothing but that representations will be there. So here you need to understand what is this entity first, because the entire planning, the entire diagrammatic representation depends on this word, that is an entity. So this is very much important word for your diagrammatic representations. So first let us understand that what is this entity word mean. So basically this entity word, it is nothing but it is called as a real world object. What it is? It is a real world object. See, for example, you are a student. You are a student and you also will be considered as one entity because you exist in the real world. You will be existing in the real world. So like that, if you see, there are multiple things that are present here. For example, if I take a remote, this is one real world object. So this is also will be called as what? One entity. So if I take a mic, this is also, it is one real world object. And this is also will be called as what? As an entity. So like that, if you see your bag, it is one real world object, it is one entity. The book which you will be using, it is one entity. The pen what you will be using, the mobile phone, the desk. So there are multiple things like this which you can give an example for an entity. So understand what is an entity? It is a real world object and you can give multiple examples for this. So you can give a student as an example, you can give an employee as an example, you can give a person as an example, you can give pen, mobile phone, laptop. So like this, you can give multiple examples for an entity. Basically, entity is nothing but anything that exists in the real world. That exists in the real world, and which anything that exists in the real world, technically we will be telling that as an object only. And that object only here we will be telling as what in our SQL, it is a entity. So whenever you go for any of the interviews, this is very much important question. So they can ask you that, tell me what is an entity. Give me some real-time examples for an entity. That time you just don't tell student is one entity, employee is one entity, all this are I am giving you an example. But when you go for the interviews, just focus around the room that which you are sitting. From there, pick up the examples. Suppose, if the interview person is using one water bottle, tell, sir, this is one entity. Suppose if the interview person is holding some pen, tell it this is one entity. So entity is nothing but what? It is one real world object that exists in the real world. So this is how that real time examples you have to give. And that is how that you can make an impression when you go for an interviews. Whatever examples I will be giving here, that you have to remember, and in the worst case that you can tell the same examples. But always try to give the realistic examples or live examples. That is when people will be understanding that you have a strong knowledge or a grip on the technology. So what is entity? It is nothing but it is one real world object. So examples we can give many. As I said, many examples we can give. So here I can give one person as an example, and I can give one books also as an examples which you will be using on your daily basis, and I can also give one mobile phone also as an example. These are just the basic examples which I am giving. But if you see a multiple examples we can give on what? On the entity. And since this is a diagrammatic representation, this is what? This is completely a diagrammatic representation. Whatever the words, terminologies we will be using, for everything a representation will be present. If representation is there only, that we will be having what? We will be can draw that ER diagram, or we can draw that representation. So whatever the terminologies that we will be seeing, for everything that we will be having a representation. Similarly here, whenever we take a person here, or whenever we are taking a books, or whenever we are taking a mobile phone, for all this, that representation you have to give, so that the people will understand, okay, this is an entity. So by seeing that representation only, people will be identifying as what? As this is one entity. And what is that representation? Representation is nothing but it is a rectangular. So what is a representation for entity? It is nothing but it is a rectangular. So entity is what? Entity is one real world object. Examples you can give many. And what is a representation for an entity? It is a rectangular. Remember, in the ER diagram, the most important things are representations. If that representations only are not there, you cannot draw that ER diagram. So along with the terminology, along with the example, it's also important to remember what? To remember the entity's representation as well. So this is how that we will be representing what? We will be representing all our entities that whatever we have. So here student, if you see student, it is one entity. Yes. So similarly here, if I take the other examples which I have like this, book, pen, laptop, course, department and semester and internet. So here, if you see very carefully that whatever the things that I have here, student, book, pen, laptop, course, department, semester. So whatever that semester and the internet that I have here, if you see that I have been segregated into two right now. And if you see every of this is nothing but it is an entity only. Student is one entity, book, pen, laptop, everything exists in the real world. Everything exists in the real world. Your courses exist in the real world. It is present. Your department, that in which department that you would have been done your engineering. It can be a computer science, a civil, mechanical, anything. Department, it is exists in the real world. But internet also exists in the real world. But in this only that you need to know and understand a certain differentiation. What is the differentiation is, if you see very carefully here, a student, book, pen, laptop, can I touch and feel them? Can I touch and feel them? Yes. But at the same time, if you see the other side that what we have here, that is a course, department, semester and internet. Tell me, can I touch or feel this? No. Can I touch or feel that? No. But here, both of them that what I have here, they are an entities only. What they are? They are an entities only. But in this entities that I have a two categories, where the first category I can touch them. We can physically see them. We can physically tell that it is exist in the real world. But there are such kind of an entities where physically they does not exist, but they exist in the real world. Department, it is present. Course, it is present. Semester, it is present. Internet, it is present. But if someone asks you that show me an internet, will you be able to show? Don't tell ma'am that 3 pipelines will come, I'll show that. No. Can you physically show an internet? No. So if they ask you a department, show me your department, will you show a classroom? That will become a classroom. But can we physically show that a department what we have? No. But it exists in the real world? Yes. So when it comes to an entities only, I have 2 categories of entities, where there are few entities that which exist in the real world physically. There are few entities that which exist in the real world, but they don't exist physically. But they exist. So that category and entities which are physically exist in the real world, they are called as a physical entities. And entities which does not exist physically in the real world, they are called as a conceptual entities. So there are actually 2 categories of entities. One is physical entities and one is conceptual entities. So this is how that we will be telling as what as a physical entity, and that we will be telling as what as a conceptual entities. So that is how that we will be giving what? We will be giving the physical entity and we will be giving what? The conceptual entity, that what we have. So how many types of entities we have here? 2 types. So what are those? Physical entity and conceptual entity. So what are physical entities? Which exist physically. Conceptual in the sense? Entities again, but they don't exist physically. So example for physical entities, what and all you can give? Conceptual. So like this you can give multiple examples for physical and conceptual. But understand, in the entities only categories will be present. And this is also is an interview question. They can ask, what is entity? Explain the types of entities that are present. Along with what? Along with the representations. Representations also is important. So right now, here for both the entities that what we have here, whether it can be a physical entity or whether it can be a conceptual entity, for entity right now the representation will be what? Rectangular. The representation will be an rectangular. So now in this only, so this is all about your entity. And this is all about the entity, and this entity is a start. This entity is a start. So for any ER diagram that which you wanted to do it, you have to start with an entity and you have to start with the representation. If this entity only, if it is not there, you cannot draw any ER diagram. And in that, if you doesn't know what are physical entities and what are conceptual entities, also you cannot plan the things properly. So every terminology that what we will be seeing here, it is very, very much important. And all these are interview questions. Right now you might think, ma'am, these are very simple. But once you give your mock, you will understand that how simple it is. So it is important to understand them clearly. So here, next we will be seeing about, again here, this is all about the entities that what we have here. So here you need to understand more about the entities that what we have. For every entity that whenever we are considering, for example, if I take a student, tell me, for a student, what and all can I specify as a properties? What and all I can specify as a properties? I can specify many things, right? I can tell an ID for a student. Can I tell that student can have a name? Can have an age? Can have a gender? Like this, if I see, we have multiple things that which we can have for an entity. Not only for the physical entity, for the conceptual entities also, we will be having a certain properties. Consider here that I am taking one customer, okay. So here, for this particular customer, as I said that again, customer is what? One entity. Customer is what? It is one entity, and for that entity, what and all we can have? A properties. ID is one property, name is one property, email, name, date of birth, address. So if you see, all these are what? All these are the properties. If we take a department, for a department also one department code will be present. A department name will be present. If I take a course, for a course ID will be present. Course name will be present. What is a course duration will be present. And what is a course fees, that also will be present. So like this, you take any entity that which you wanted. For every entity that we will be having a certain properties. And that properties also are very, very much important. So here, the same thing that I will consider here and I will tell here as a customer. Same I will consider, I will take here a customer. And customer is what? It is one entity. And how we have to represent that? By the rectangular. And you can see that we have represented it by the rectangular. And when we talk about this, customer, can you see all these attributes can be present for the customer? Properties can be present. A customer can have an ID, age, email, name, date of birth, address. So a customer can have all these properties. And this properties only, technically here we will be telling as an attributes. What we will be telling here technically? Attributes. Basically, an attribute is nothing but it is a property that describes your entity. See, ID we are giving. Why we are giving an ID? Don't you think that ID describes you as a person? Wherever you go, in the TAP Academy, you have an ID. In a college also, you would have had an ID. And you will be having your Aadhaar card number also. Why? That is an identification that you belongs to an India. Or you are a citizen of India. So basically, that is nothing but it is a property which is describing you. And again, you is what here? It is an entity. So why do they keep names? Because that is how they call you. That is how that they will be describing you. And similarly here, we have so many things that which can describe our entity. Like we have an email, we have a date of birth, we have an address. So like this we will be having what? We will be having a multiple properties for an entity. And what are these properties technically called as? Attributes. And what are attributes? Examples are ID, name, age, gender. But what are attributes? They are the properties that describes your entity. So here both the terminologies are important. What is an entity and what is an attribute as well. Entity is one real world object and it is represented by rectangular. An attribute is what? It is one property that describes your entity. Examples: ID, name, age, gender. We can give any representation that which we wanted to give. And similarly, for this attributes also we have a representation. Why? Because since it is an ER diagram, since this is a diagrammatic representation, definitely we should have what? We should have the representation here. So here this representation, this is how that representation will be given for an attribute. And it is nothing but it is an ellipse. What is a representation for an attribute? It is an ellipse. Representation for entity, rectangular. Representation for an attribute, ellipse. So this is how that representations that you have to remember whenever you are drawing what? Whenever you are drawing an ER diagram. And I have a name here. Name is what? Basically it is one attribute. Name is what? It is one attribute. And here, name, can I divide as a first name? Yes. Name, can I divide as a last name here? Can I divide as a last name? And date of birth, can I divide here year, month or day? And even address, whatever we have, we can change that to what? City we can give, a pin code we can give, we can divide. We can divide this particular attributes. Understand? We have a certain attributes where that attributes we can divide further. Most of you guys would have been filled the forms, correct? In some of the forms or some of the people, they will be taking as a name only. But some people, they will be taking as a first name, middle name, last name. When it comes to the date of birth also, they might take as what? As year. They might take as a day, month, individually, or else they might also take it as what? As completely as well. But most of the times if you see that, they will be dividing and they will be asking you that individual information. Similarly, it happens for the address as well. In the address also, sometimes if you see, they would have been given as address 1, address 2, they would have been given. But sometimes if you see that, they would have also been given as a state. They would have been given as a pin code. They would have been given as a street. So what are all this? Address only. But sometimes what they will be doing? They will be individually asking the information. So here, there are such attributes. In the overall attributes only, there are such attributes that where we can divide that attributes further. The best example for such attributes is your name, your date of birth, your address. Now tell me, ID, I have an attribute. Tell me, can I divide an ID attribute? Anytime have you divided and have you given it anywhere? No. And what about the age? Anytime have you divided your age or anytime asked you to divide your age and fill the form? No. And what about the email? Email also, whenever you are giving, you have to give it completely. ID also, whenever you are giving, you have to give it completely. Age also, whenever you are giving, you have to give it completely. But there are some other attributes like name, date of birth, address where they can divide that particular information and they can ask you to fill. So this is how that we will be having what? We will be having all the different things that which we will be having. Dividing everything. So in attributes only here, there are two categories in this example. And attributes which can be divided further and attributes which cannot be divided further. So in this example, how many types of attributes we have? Two types. So first one is what? An attributes which we can divide and attributes which we cannot divide. So understand, an attributes which cannot be divided further, they are technically called as a simple attributes. What they are called as? Simple attributes. And attributes which can be divided further, they are called as a composite attributes. Composite attributes. And attributes which cannot be divided further, they are called as what? Simple attributes. And attributes which can be divided further are called as what? Composite attributes. Example for simple attributes? Composite attributes? See, these are just an examples. So like this you can find multiple entities. Like this you can find multiple attributes for that particular entities, and what you can do the segregations. You can do what? You can do the segregations between the simple and between the composite attributes. And again, that representations are also very much important. For the simple attribute, the representation will be ellipse only. There is no change for the representation for the simple attribute. But when it comes to the composite attribute, representation will be, first one attribute will be there and later that will be divided into the different attributes. So this will be the representation for what? For the composite attribute. For the simple attribute, the representation will be just ellipse only. But for the composite attribute, first ellipse will be there, that will be again divided into the further. And it is not that always it will be divided into 2, it can be divided into 3 as also. It depends on the data. And if you see and observe one thing here very carefully, whatever the scenarios that we are considering here, we are not assuming the things. These are present in the realistic way. This is how the real data it is present. Because that we are dealing with the facts and figures, always remember one thing. Whenever the requirement comes, whenever you are dealing with the facts and figures, whenever you are drawing an ER diagrams, make sure you think in the perspective of how the real data is present in the world. You should always correlate with the data which is present in the real world. Here I cannot come and tell that ID I wanted to divide, so I will divide. It doesn't make any sense. Because ID means you have to give a complete value only, that is a standard. So you have to think how? You have to think in perspective of realistic data whenever you are dealing with any sort of the things in your entire SQL. You cannot just assume the things that however you wanted. So here we have that different segregations here. As I said, we have a simple attribute and we have what? A composite attribute. And here only, in this examples only, we have other category as well. Here it is not only the simple or it is not only the composite attribute. We have the other type of attribute as well. What is that other type of an attribute if you ask me? I have an ID here, correct? Tell me one student or one person how many ID values he will be having? Only one. If he has more than one, it is not valid. He will be having what? He will be having only one. And how many names that they will be having? Please don't consider your nicknames and all, your original name. Only one? Yes, so for a name attribute, how many values I can have? Only one value. What about the age? Only one value. Yes, and what about the date of birth? Only One value. What about the email ID? Is there any restriction that one person should have only one email ID? No. A person can have more than one email ID. And when it comes to an address, we have a permanent address and we have a temporary address. Yes or no? See, whenever you are filling a form, both the things they will take. What is a permanent address and what is a temporary address? So here, that address value that what we have, we can have more than one value. So here, there are few attributes that where in that few of them will be containing or should contain a single value only. And there are few attributes that which can contain more than one value, means an attribute can contain multiple values. So this only that we will be segregating and we will be differentiating here as a single valued attributes and multi-valued attributes. And attributes which will be containing a single value, they are called as what? Single valued attributes. And attributes which can contain a more than one value, we have to call it as multi-valued attributes. And if you see the representation here, for the single valued attribute, the representation will be ellipse only. But when it comes to the multi-valued attribute, the representation is a double ellipse. What is the representation for the single valued attribute? It is an ellipse. So don't specify as a single ellipse, just tell it as ellipse. And for multi-valued attribute, it is a double ellipse. And what is the representation for the physical entity? It is a rectangular. Conceptual entity? It is a rectangular only. What is the representation for simple attribute? Ellipse. What is the representation for composite attribute? Again, it is not one ellipse. That ellipse will be divided further. So that representation you have to give it properly. So here only we have that segregations here as what? As a multi-valued attribute. And we have a segregation here of what? Of a single valued attribute as well. And here, one more attribute which is very much important, which is a derived attribute. So far we have seen a simple attribute, composite attribute, single valued attribute, multi-valued attribute. And in that we have one more important attribute, that is a derived attribute. And representation for the derived attribute is a dotted ellipse. What is the representation for the derived attribute? Dotted ellipse. Now, why age only it is called as a derived attribute? First of all, what is a derived attribute? Understand, I have one attribute. From that attribute, if I can take any value or if I can take any information, that attribute will become as a derived attribute. For example, I have a date of birth here. By keeping this date of birth, can I get the age value? By keeping a date of birth, can we get a age? Yes. So here, that age information I can get from the date of birth attribute. I can derive the age information or I can get the age value from the date of birth attribute. So, derived attributes are such attributes where it can be derived from the other attributes. So, many of the students, if we ask that give an example for the derived attribute, they will tell date of birth. Understand, date of birth is not a derived attribute. Age is a derived attribute. Why? Because Age is what that we will be getting from where? We will be getting from the date of birth. So like this, if I tell you one employee date of joining, can you tell an experience? If you tell date of joining, can you tell an experience? So in date of joining and experience, which is a derived attribute? Experience. If I tell the marks, can you tell the result? If you tell the marks, can you tell the result? Yes. So marks is one attribute, result also is one attribute. So in both of this, which is a derived attribute? It is a result. So you need to understand, we have an attribute which is a derived attribute and it is represented by the dotted ellipse. And what is a derived attribute means? An attribute which can be derived from the other attribute. So always, whenever you are telling this statement, probably the person might not understand what exactly that you are trying to convey. So for that, what you have to do, you have to give a proper example. You have to tell, see, this is one attribute, this is one attribute. When I can get an information, then this attribute will become as what? As a derived attribute. And that derived attribute will be represented by what? Will be represented by the dotted ellipse. So till now, how many types of an attributes we have seen? So what are those? Simple attribute, composite attribute, single valued, multi-valued and derived attribute. And we have one final and the most important attribute compared to all of them, which is nothing but your key attribute. Which is nothing but your key attribute. Can you see which is a key attribute? ID. And can you see what is the representation we have for the key attribute? It is underlined. First of all, what is this key attribute? Any attribute will be having a unique value, or any attribute which can be identified uniquely. So we will be telling such attributes as a key attributes. Now, why I am considering only this attribute as a key attribute is, everyone has a TAP Academy ID, student ID you have? No, still. Who is that who don't have? Mahesh Babua. Who and all you will remember in class C. Remember entity, remember attribute, it will help. So what is a key attribute here? An attribute which can be identified uniquely. See, everyone has a TAP Academy ID. And tell me, is that IDs are repeated? So for you, it is a unique ID, it is a unique value, yes. So that will not be repeated. Suppose if it is getting repeated, it means that it is not valid. It means what? It is not valid. But can I tell a name attribute as a key attribute? Can I tell the name attribute as a key attribute? No. Why? Because few people can have a same name. Even the initial also, the surname also sometimes will be same. And what about the age? We can have a same, right? And what about the email ID? What about the email ID? See, if you see 2 to 3 years back in the email that whatever we have, it will allow you to create the duplicate email IDs. It was allowing. But now, they made it very efficient way that if already one email ID it is present, again you cannot create the same. So if we are considering that, partially we can tell that email ID also sometimes can be unique, but I'll give you the scenario. Suppose if any parent comes, if any parent is coming that to make an admission for their children's, 2 or 3 children's, they don't have an email ID. Don't you think that parent email ID is what will be given for all the 3 or 4 children's? So there can we tell that uniqueness will be maintained? No. An attribute which completely becomes an unique, that only you have to tell as what? As a key attribute. So that is why here email I am not considering as what? As a key attribute. And what about the date of birth and address? Date of birth and address, can it be unique? If your house is individual, fine, but if it is an apartment? If it is an apartment, yes, door number will be present, you will be there. Once you shift, some other can come, and in your home, will you the only person who will be there? Siblings can be present, then for that 3 members, same address only will be present. For 3 members or 4 members, same address only will be present. So can we tell that is an unique identification for one person? No. So in whatever the attributes that we have here, if you are seeing all these attributes, ID is one such attribute that where we can have what? We can have an unique values. So that is why this is called as what? Key attribute. And what is the representation for that? Underline. So all these are the important attributes. So tell me, what is entity? Example for entity. Not even one word I am understanding. What is the representation for entity? Rectangular. How many types of attributes we have? What are those? Simple. Done, I understood. So I'll be stopping a session here for today. Please do the revisions and come for the next class. Next class you will be having, okay? Please do the revisions and come. Thank you everyone. Thank you all. Thank you online students.